John Muir and our responsibility to protect the environment. The father of the American conservation movement, John Muir, embraced the responsibility we all have to maintain and preserve our natural resources. John Muir was someone who influenced our nation's environment more than almost anyone else in the history of our country. President Theodore Roosevelt recognized this and said this about John Muir. Not only are his books delightful, not only is he the author to whom all men turn when they think of the Sierras and northern glaciers and the giant trees of the California slope, but he was also, what few nature lovers are, a man able to influence contemporary thought and action on the subjects to which he had devoted his life. John Muir was one of our nation's greatest conservationists and has preserved many natural beauties for future generations. Muir understood that although we have a right to our natural resources, we cannot abuse them. He has left his legacy through the Sierra Club, a club where the members live out John Muir's dream of preserving our nation's environment. John Muir was born in Dunbar, Scotland on April 21, 1838. When Muir was 11, his family moved to America, where he worked on the family farm in Wisconsin. When Muir got time off, he would spend it wandering the fields, enjoying the natural beauty. His grandfather also took him on nature walks regularly. It was during these walks with his grandfather, and when Muir was wandering the fields, that he developed his love for nature. When he was older, Muir went to the University of Wisconsin for 2 years, and then began working as a carriage part manufacturer. There, Muir injured his eye and lost vision for a month. It was after he regained his sight that Muir decided to change his life's direction and begin to travel throughout the nation, observing nature's beauty. Muir said this about his injury: "This affliction has driven me to the sweet fields. God has to nearly kill us sometimes to teach us a lesson." The conservation movement also influenced Muir's early life. During the conservation movement, a political, social, and environmental movement that sought to protect the environment, many pieces of literature were published to draw attention to the importance of nature. The conservation movement began in the 1850s and most likely played a large role in what John Muir decided to do with his life. After regaining his vision and changing his life's direction, Muir walked 1,000 miles from Indianapolis to the Gulf of Mexico, observing the natural beauty around him. He then sailed to Cuba, further satisfying his wanderlust. After this, he sailed to Panama and then up the west coast, where he landed in San Francisco in March of 1868. From then on, although he continued to travel the world, California became John Muir's home. After John Muir had been all over the world, the place that he found the most beautiful was California's Yosemite and Sierra Nevada. Muir walked across the valley for the first time in 1868 and wrote this about it. "Then it seemed to me the Sierra should be called no Nevada or Snowy Range, but the Range of Light, the most divinely beautiful of all the mountain chains I have ever seen." Muir began living in Yosemite and made a living herding sheep. It was while Muir was living in Yosemite among the glaciers that he developed his controversial theory of the glaciation of Yosemite Valley, a theory that Yosemite had been gouged out by a mighty glacier of the Ice Age. Muir's publication of his glaciation theory of Yosemite Valley was the beginning of his national notability. Soon Muir found famous men including Joseph LeConte, Asa Gray, and Ralph Waldo Emerson coming to see him at his small pine cabin. In 1874, Muir began his writing career when he published a series of articles titled Studies of the Sierra. After publishing the articles, Muir moved out of the mountains and lived in Oakland, California, where he married Louisa Wanda Strenzel. Once he was married, he moved to Martinez, California, where he raised his 2 daughters and went into partnership with his father-in-law and managed the family fruit ranch. But managing a farm did not satisfy Muir's thirst for adventure, and he began traveling throughout the world. Even though John Muir changed his life's direction and began traveling to experience the natural beauty of the world, he had not yet begun his work as a conservationist. It wasn't until he wrote a series of articles called Wild Wool that drew attention to the devastation of mountain meadows and forests by sheep and cattle that Muir began his work as a conservationist. After the articles were published, Muir, along with the help of Robert Underwood Johnson, worked to remedy the destruction that sheep and cattle were creating. In 1890, John Muir was heard, and an act of Congress created Yosemite National Park. Muir was also personally involved in the creation of Sequoia, Mount Rainier, Petrified Forest, and Grand Canyon National Parks. Because of his actions, John Muir is often rightly called the father of our national park system. In 1892, John Muir founded the Sierra Club after Robert Johnson and others suggested that an association be formed to protect the newly created Yosemite National Park from the assaults of stockmen and others who would make the boundaries smaller. The club's purpose was, in Muir's words, to do something for wilderness and make the mountains glad. The Sierra Club's first conservation campaign was on May 28, 1892, and was an effort to defeat a proposed reduction in the boundaries of Yosemite National Park. For many years, the club fought many battles to preserve and conserve our nation's natural beauties. One major event in the Sierra Club's history was when President Theodore Roosevelt visited Yosemite with John Muir. John Muir came to the president's attention when he published his book, Our National Parks. Muir and Roosevelt went on a 3-day wilderness trip that included Sentinel Dome, Glacier Point, and Yosemite Valley. President Theodore Roosevelt played a large role in John Muir's life and contributed immensely to Muir's mission of conservation. During his presidency, Roosevelt signed into existence 5 national parks, 18 national monuments, 55 national bird sanctuaries and wildlife refuges, and 150 national forests. Roosevelt also created the Antiquities Act of June 8, 1906. This act, although it did not create a park itself, allowed Roosevelt and his successors to proclaim historic landmarks, historic or prehistoric structures, and other objects of historic or scientific interest in federal ownership as national monuments. Although the club had many successes over the years, they also had some failures. One of the biggest failures, and the one that greatly upset Muir, was Hetch Hetchy. This was one of Muir's last battles and one he was extremely passionate about. City leaders in San Francisco wanted to dam Hetch Hetchy Valley to create a water source for the growing population of the city. This deeply upset Muir, who said, "Dam Hetch Hetchy, as well dam for water tanks the people's cathedrals and churches, for no holier temple has ever been consecrated by the heart of man." Muir fought many years to save the valley, a valley he believed as glorious as Yosemite. But in 1913, the decision was made to dam Hetch Hetchy. John Muir was devastated. "It's hard to bear," Muir wrote. "The destruction of the charming groves and gardens, the finest in all of California, goes to my heart." A year later, on December 24, 1914, John Muir passed away while visiting his daughter in Los Angeles. Although Muir died, his dream did not, but continued on through the Sierra Club. Muir not only influenced the environment directly, but also influenced the way people thought about nature. This also impacted our environment because people in the future changed their ways and focused more on conserving the natural beauties of our nation. John Muir has impacted history and left his legacy in multiple ways. Due to his efforts, we have national parks to preserve and view the natural beauties our nation has to offer. Secondly, because of John Muir, laws have been created to preserve the environment for the future. We also have a large amount of information documented by John Muir about the environment, specifically Yosemite National Park. In 1916, the National Park Service was created with the support of the Sierra Club. The National Park Service helps protect and conserve our national parks and was created because of John Muir's efforts to preserve our environment. Today, the Sierra Club still operates and continues to live out Muir's dream of conserving the environment. The club is currently working on campaigns to move beyond coal, oil, and natural gas and create clean, abundant, and affordable energy. Coal, oil, and natural gases all harm the environment, so through the club's efforts, we are creating a cleaner place to live. The club is also working in a campaign to preserve America's beautiful wildlands. All of these campaigns are examples of Muir's understanding of how we may use natural resources, but if we are not responsible, we will ruin the natural beauties around us. It is because of John Muir that past, present, and future generations were and are able to enjoy our country's natural beauties. If it weren't for Muir, we might be living in a country where the natural resources have been depleted. He made people realize that even though we do have a right to our nation's natural resources, if we are not responsible, then we will deplete our resources and destroy the beauty of the environment. Although John Muir may no longer be with us, his legacy and dream lives on through the Sierra Club. As Mark Lalania said, John Muir was one of the most influential environmentalists in America, if not the world. His writings and activism inspired generations of conservationists, from presidents to Boy Scouts.